My name is Ariana, and I am 35 years old. I am sitting here in this courthouse hallway, my hands trembling as I hold these divorce papers. My 8-year-old daughter Lily is at school right now, completely unaware that today could change everything for us. 6 years ago, her father Brandon walked out on us when she was just 2 years old. He left us with nothing but empty promises and unpaid bills. For 6 long years, I built our life from scratch, while he was nowhere to be found. Now suddenly he wants to come back and claim half of everything I worked so hard to create. Before I tell you about the day that changed everything, where are you watching this from? Please let me know in the comments below, and do not forget to hit that like button if you believe that truth always wins in the end. This story will show you why sometimes the things we prepare for in advance become our saving grace when we need them most. 12 years ago, I met Brandon at a small coffee shop in downtown Denver. It was one of those crisp October mornings where the leaves were just starting to turn golden. I was 23, fresh out of college with my business administration degree, working as a junior marketing assistant, and feeling like the whole world was ahead of me. Brandon was 26, a software engineer with bright green eyes and this incredible way of talking about his dreams that made you believe anything was possible. He would spend hours telling me about his plans to start his own tech company. The way he described his vision for revolutionary apps that would change how people connected with each other, I thought I was dating the next Steve Jobs. His confidence was magnetic. When he spoke about the future, his eyes would light up and his hands would gesture excitedly, painting pictures of success that seemed so real I could almost touch them. We dated for 2 beautiful years. Brandon would pick me up after work in his blue Toyota Camry, and we would drive up to the mountains just to watch the sunset. He knew all these hidden spots around the Rockies, where we could sit for hours without seeing another soul. Those were the days when I believed love could conquer anything, when I thought our biggest problem would be deciding what color to paint our future kitchen. But Brandon never actually took any steps toward starting that company. There was always an excuse. He needed to save more money first. The market timing was not right. He was still researching the competition. Looking back now, I realize he was more in love with talking about success than actually working for it. The proposal happened on a hiking trail near Rocky Mountain National Park. Brandon had packed this elaborate picnic complete with my favorite strawberry shortcake from the bakery near my apartment. When he got down on one knee with his grandmother's diamond ring, I said yes without hesitation. I was so in love, so sure that we were meant to be together forever. But then my father got involved. Gerald Thompson had been practicing family law for 25 years, and he had seen enough divorces to know that love does not always last. When I told him about our engagement, his first question was not about the wedding date or the guest list. It was about a prenuptial agreement. The conversation happened over dinner at their house in Cherry Creek. My mother had made her famous pot roast, and we were all sitting around the dining table when Dad brought it up. He explained that my grandmother had left me $150,000 plus her house in the suburbs when she passed away 2 years earlier. It was not just about the money, he said. It was about protecting what previous generations had worked to build. Brandon did not take it well. I remember the exact moment when I brought up the prenup. We were in his apartment and he was cooking spaghetti carbonara, humming some song under his breath. When I mentioned what my father had suggested, the humming stopped. He turned around slowly, the wooden spoon still in his hand, and I saw something in his face I had never seen before. Hurt, yes, but also something that looked almost like anger. He said it felt like I was planning for our marriage to fail before it even started. How could I claim to love him while simultaneously protecting myself from him? The conversation went on for hours. He paced around his small living room, running his hands through his hair and asking me over and over why I did not trust him. I tried to explain that it was not about trust. The prenup would protect both of us. It stated clearly that any assets brought into the marriage would remain with the original owner, while anything we built together would be divided based on actual financial contributions. I even offered to help him start his business once we were married to combine our resources and dreams. After 3 weeks of discussions and one very uncomfortable dinner where Brandon barely spoke to my parents, he finally agreed to sign. He said he understood that this was just a formality, that it would not matter because we would never get divorced anyway. I felt relieved that we had worked through our first real disagreement as an engaged couple. Our wedding was small but perfect. 80 guests gathered at the Botanical Gardens in Denver, surrounded by roses and baby's breath. I wore my mother's dress with small alterations, and Brandon looked handsome in his navy suit. When we exchanged vows, promising to love each other in good times and bad, I believed with my whole heart that we would beat the statistics. We would be one of those couples who made it to their golden anniversary still holding hands and finishing each other's sentences. The reception lasted until midnight. We danced to At Last by Etta James for our first song, and I remember thinking that this was what happiness felt like. Complete, overwhelming, and infinite. If someone had told me that night that our marriage would fall apart within 5 years, I would have laughed at the impossibility of it. The first year of marriage felt like playing house with my best friend. I had been promoted to marketing manager at a mid-sized advertising firm, bringing in $75,000 a year. We moved into a cute 2-bedroom apartment downtown, and I loved everything about our new life together. We would cook dinner together most nights, binge-watch Netflix series on the weekends, and make plans for our future that always seemed to involve Brandon's eventual startup success. But Brandon could not seem to hold down a job. He would come home with stories about incompetent bosses who did not understand his vision or coworkers who were threatened by his innovative ideas. Every few months there would be another resignation or termination. The companies were always the problem, never Brandon. They lacked vision. They were stuck in outdated thinking. They were intimidated by someone who thought outside the box. When I found out I was pregnant with Lily, we were both excited but also terrified. I was doing well at work, but I would need to take 3 months of unpaid maternity leave. Brandon promised he would step up, that he would find stable employment and take care of our finances while I recovered from childbirth and bonded with our baby. Instead, he got fired from his job at a software development company for consistently arriving late and missing important meetings. He said his supervisor was a micromanager who did not appreciate creative thinking, that the corporate environment was stifling his potential. I was 8 months pregnant, exhausted from working longer hours to compensate for our reduced income, and desperately worried about how we would pay our bills. After Lily was born, our life became a delicate balancing act that I was performing mostly alone. Brandon had convinced himself that he was contributing by researching market opportunities for his future business. He would spend entire days reading tech blogs, analyzing competitor strategies, and sketching out app designs that never moved beyond the planning phase. Meanwhile, I was juggling a colicky newborn with a demanding job. Lily would cry for hours every evening, and I would walk the floors of our apartment, bouncing her gently while trying to respond to work emails on my phone. When Brandon was home, he would offer to help, but he had a way of disappearing whenever things got really difficult. He was always taking important phone calls or working on crucial research that could not be interrupted. Our joint checking account was bleeding money. Diapers, formula, doctor visits, and daycare costs were consuming our budget faster than my salary could replenish it. I found myself dipping into my inheritance for the first time, using the money my grandmother had left me to cover basic living expenses. Each withdrawal felt like a betrayal of her memory and my own financial security. The arguments about money became a regular feature of our evenings. Brandon would accuse me of being controlling and unsupportive of his entrepreneurial dreams. He said I was too focused on immediate stability and not thinking big picture. How could he build something revolutionary if I was constantly pressuring him to take just any job that paid the bills? I tried to be understanding. I knew that traditional employment might feel limiting to someone with Brandon's ambitions. So I started taking on freelance marketing projects during Lily's naps and after she went to bed. I would work until 2 in the morning, designing websites and managing social media campaigns for small businesses, all while Brandon played video games in the living room. The final straw came when I discovered that Brandon was spending 6 to 8 hours a day playing online games while I was at work and Lily was at daycare. When I confronted him about it, he said he was networking with other entrepreneurs and learning about gaming industry trends. But I had seen his screen time reports, and I knew the difference between research and recreation. One Thursday evening in March, after I had been up until 3 a.m. working on a client project, and then gotten up at 6 to prepare Lily's bottles for daycare, Brandon announced that he needed to take a break from our marriage. He said he felt suffocated by my expectations and needed space to figure out who he was outside of our relationship. He needed to find himself before he could be the husband and father we deserved. I will never forget the morning Brandon walked out of our lives. It was a Saturday in early spring, one of those days when Denver gets a surprise snowfall after weeks of warm weather. I was in the kitchen making pancakes for Lily, who was almost 2 and had just learned to say complete sentences. She was sitting in her high chair babbling about the snow outside, and asking if we could build a snowman after breakfast. Brandon came downstairs carrying a large suitcase and his laptop bag. He had packed quietly the night before while I was giving Lily her bath. I did not even know he was serious about leaving until I saw him standing by the front door in his winter coat car keys already in his hand. He said he needed space to figure out his life, that he could not think clearly while feeling so much pressure to provide for us. He promised it would not be forever, just long enough for him to get his head straight and start the business he had always talked about. He would send money as soon as he could, and we would work everything out once he was more stable. Lily saw him with the suitcase and started crying. She reached out her little arms toward him and kept saying, "Daddy, go, Daddy, go," in this heartbroken voice that still echoes in my memory. Brandon kissed her forehead quickly and told her he was going on a long work trip. Then he walked out the door without looking back, leaving me to explain to a toddler why her father had suddenly disappeared. The first few weeks were the hardest thing I had ever experienced. Lily would wake up crying in the middle of the night calling for Brandon. I had to tell her over and over that Daddy was working far away, but that he loved her very much. I was lying to my own daughter because I could not bear to see the confusion and hurt in her eyes. Managing everything alone felt impossible. When Lily got sick with a fever that spiked to 103 degrees, I spent the entire night in the emergency room by myself, holding her while she cried, and wishing desperately that I had someone to share the fear and responsibility. The doctor said it was just a virus, but those hours of uncertainty taught me what true loneliness felt like. Through mutual friends, I learned that Brandon was living with a 24-year-old named Jessica in Colorado Springs. She was a yoga instructor who posted inspirational quotes on Instagram and seemed to believe that Brandon was this misunderstood genius who just needed the right environment to flourish. I felt sick knowing that while I was struggling to keep our family together, he was starting fresh with someone who did not know about his pattern of broken promises. When I asked him for child support, Brandon said he needed time to get financially stable before he could send money. He was working on launching his business and could not commit to regular payments until his income was more predictable. Meanwhile, our rent was due, the electric bill was overdue, and I was buying generic groceries while calculating whether I could afford to put gas in my car. I had to sell my Honda Civic to make ends meet. The car was paid off and worth about $8,000, which covered 2 months of expenses. But now I was taking public transportation to work while carrying a diaper bag and trying to manage a squirmy toddler on crowded buses. Some days, Lily would have a meltdown on the bus, and I would feel the stares of other passengers while my face burned with embarrassment and exhaustion. I took on every freelance project I could find. In addition to my full-time marketing job, I was designing websites, writing content for small businesses, and selling handmade baby blankets on Etsy. I would put Lily to bed at 8 p.m. then work until 2 or 3 in the morning before getting up at 6 to start the whole cycle again. The worst moment came one evening at the grocery store. Lily had spotted a small stuffed elephant that she wanted desperately. She hugged it to her chest and said, "Please, Mommy," with such hope in her voice. I had to calculate the cost of that $12 toy against our weekly food budget, and I realized we could not afford both the elephant and enough vegetables for the week. Watching her face fall as I gently took the toy away and put it back on the shelf broke something inside me. That night after Lily was asleep, I sat in my car in our apartment complex parking lot and cried until I could not breathe. I felt like I was failing at everything that mattered. I was exhausted, broke, and more alone than I had ever imagined possible. I questioned every decision I had made and wondered if I was strong enough to give my daughter the life she deserved. The turning point came 6 months after Brandon left, when I realized that waiting for him to step up was just another form of false hope. I could not control his choices, but I could control mine. So I made the hardest decision of my life up to that point. I stopped waiting for rescue and started building our future myself. I enrolled in an advanced digital marketing certification program that met 2 evenings a week. It meant even less sleep and even more juggling, but I knew I needed specialized skills to command higher freelance rates. The program covered search engine optimization, social media advertising, conversion analytics, and content marketing strategy. These were the skills that could transform my side hustle into a real business. At Lily's daycare, I met Sarah Rodriguez, another single mother who was raising her 4-year-old son Miguel after her husband died in a construction accident. Sarah worked as a bookkeeper for several small businesses and understood the constant struggle of balancing work with single parenthood. We started helping each other in small ways that made an enormous difference in both our lives. Sarah would pick up Lily from daycare on the nights I had class, and Lily would have dinner and play with Miguel until I could collect her around 9 p.m. In exchange, I helped Sarah create a professional website for her bookkeeping business and taught her how to use social media to attract new clients. We became each other's emergency contact, backup, childcare, and emotional support system. My first real business breakthrough came when the owner of a local bakery asked me to help her increase online sales. Maria's Sweet Treats had been struggling to compete with chain bakeries, despite making the most incredible custom cakes in our neighborhood. I created a comprehensive digital marketing strategy that included a new website, social media campaigns, showcasing her artistic cake designs, and targeted advertising to engage couples planning weddings. Within 3 months, Maria's online orders increased by 200%. She was booking wedding cakes 6 months in advance and had to hire 2 additional bakers to keep up with demand. When she paid my invoice for $5,000, I stared at the check for a full minute before depositing it. It was more money than I had ever earned from freelance work, and proof that I could build something valuable from nothing. Word spread quickly through Denver's small business community. A real estate agency hired me to revamp their digital presence. A family-owned restaurant wanted help promoting their catering services. A fitness studio needed someone to manage their online advertising campaigns. Each success led to new referrals, and I found myself working with clients who valued my expertise and paid fair rates for quality work. Lily was adjusting to our new life with the resilience that children possess. She learned to entertain herself quietly while I worked building elaborate houses with her blocks or drawing pictures that she would proudly show me during our dinner breaks. She never complained about the busy schedule or asked why other kids had 2 parents at school events while she only had me. One evening, while I was updating a client's website and Lily was practicing writing her letters at the kitchen table, she looked up and said, "Mommy, you are really good at computer work." Her simple observation made me realize that she was seeing me as competent and strong, not struggling and overwhelmed. I was modeling independence and determination even when I felt like I was barely keeping my head above water. After 18 months of building my client base, I was earning more from my marketing business than from my full-time job. I started to dream about leaving the security of employment to focus entirely on my own company. It was a terrifying prospect, giving up steady income and health insurance, but I could see the potential for something bigger than I had ever imagined. The day I received my first 5-figure contract from a growing tech startup, I knew I was ready to take the leap. I gave my 2 weeks' notice at the advertising firm, set up a proper home office in our second bedroom, and officially launched Thompson Marketing Solutions. I chose to use my maiden name for the business, wanting to build something that was entirely mine. Brandon called for the first time in over 2 years, just 1 week after I launched my company. He had heard through mutual friends that I was starting a business and wanted to congratulate me on my success. His voice sounded different, less confident, and more tentative. He asked about Lily and said he had been thinking about us a lot lately. He wondered if we could meet for coffee to talk about the possibility of him being more involved in our lives. I told him that if he wanted to be part of Lily's life, he would need to go through the proper legal channels and establish a formal custody arrangement. I was no longer willing to let him drift in and out of our lives based on his convenience or emotional needs. Too much had changed, and I had learned too much about my own strength to go backward. 3 years after Brandon abandoned us, my marketing agency had grown beyond my wildest expectations. I was managing 8 employees from our office space in a renovated warehouse downtown. We were generating over $200,000 in annual revenue, working with clients ranging from family-owned restaurants to mid-sized technology companies. I had built something real and sustainable, something that provided security for Lily and pride for myself. Lily was thriving in 2nd grade, taking piano lessons twice a week and swimming at the community center every Saturday morning. She had friends who invited her to birthday parties and sleepovers, and she never seemed to feel like she was missing anything important because her family looked different from others. We had created our own traditions and rhythms that worked perfectly for us. I had even started dating again. Michael Torres was a 3rd-grade teacher at a school across town, patient and kind in a way that felt completely foreign after my experience with Brandon. He understood that Lily came first in my priorities, and he never pressured me to move faster than felt comfortable. When he met Lily for the first time at a children's museum, he spent 2 hours patiently helping her build elaborate structures in the engineering exhibit without checking his phone or seeming bored. We had moved into a beautiful 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood with good schools and tree-lined streets. I paid for it entirely with money I had earned through my business, never touching the inheritance that my grandmother had left me. The house had a big backyard where Lily could practice soccer and a finished basement that I converted into a playroom for her and her friends. Life felt stable and hopeful in a way I had forgotten was possible. I was sleeping through the night, taking weekends off from work, and actually enjoying the process of building my business instead of just surviving day to day. I had learned to trust my own judgment and capabilities in a way that made me feel powerful and grounded. Then Brandon showed up at Lily's school. It was Lily's 8th birthday, and I was arriving to pick her up after her class party with cupcakes I had made the night before. As I walked across the playground, I saw a man in an expensive suit talking to one of the teachers. When he turned around, I recognized him immediately, even though he looked older and more polished than when he had left us. Brandon was holding a bouquet of pink roses and a large wrapped present with a shiny bow. He smiled when he saw me, the same charming smile that had won me over 12 years earlier. But when Lily came running toward me with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, she stopped short when she saw the strange man standing next to me. She did not recognize her own father. Brandon knelt down and said, "Happy birthday, sweetheart," in a voice that was trying too hard to sound warm and familiar. Lily stepped closer to me and whispered, "Who is that man, Mommy?" The hurt that flashed across Brandon's face was unmistakable, but I felt no sympathy for him in that moment. I told the teacher that everything was fine and guided Lily toward my car, while Brandon followed us across the parking lot. He was trying to make conversation with a daughter who did not remember him asking about school and her friends while she clung to my hand and looked confused and frightened. That evening, after I had explained to Lily that the man was her biological father and reassured her that she was safe and loved, Brandon called me. He said he wanted to meet privately to discuss our future as a family. He had made mistakes, he admitted, but he was ready to make things right. He had learned important lessons about responsibility and commitment, and he wanted another chance to be the husband and father he should have been from the beginning. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop downtown, the same place where we had first met 13 years earlier. The irony was not lost on me sitting across from him at a small table while he tried to convince me that he had changed. He looked successful in his tailored clothes and expensive watch, but there was something desperate in his eyes that made me suspicious of his motives. He talked about the business he had finally started, a consulting firm that helped companies optimize their digital processes. He was making good money and had learned valuable lessons about persistence and follow through. He wanted to be part of Lily's life, to help support her financially and emotionally. He even suggested that we could try couples therapy to see if we could rebuild our relationship. I listened without interrupting, but inside I was analyzing every word for hidden motives. When I asked why now, after 3 years of complete absence, he became evasive. He said timing had never been right before, but now he was in a position to be the man we deserved. Something about his explanation did not ring true. 2 weeks later, I received a formal letter from a law firm demanding that I agree to joint custody of Lily and threatening to pursue a division of marital assets if I did not cooperate. Brandon was not interested in reconciliation at all. He was making a calculated move to claim both his daughter and half of everything I had built since he left. The legal papers arrived on the same day I signed the biggest contract in my company's history. A growing technology firm had hired us to handle their complete digital marketing strategy for the next 18 months, worth over $100,000. I was celebrating this milestone when my assistant handed me the certified mail envelope that would change everything. Brandon's lawsuit claimed that he deserved joint physical custody of Lily based on his improved financial situation and his desire to be an active father. More shocking was his demand for 50% of my business assets, our house and other property acquired during our separation. His lawyer argued that Colorado's marital property laws entitled him to half of everything accumulated while we were legally married, regardless of who had actually earned or built it. I immediately called Patricia Wong, a family law attorney who had been recommended by Sarah's lawyer. Patricia had 15 years of experience with complex divorce cases and a reputation for protecting her clients' interests without unnecessary drama. During our first meeting, she reviewed all my financial documents and asked detailed questions about my marriage to Brandon and the circumstances of his departure. Patricia explained that under Colorado law, Brandon could potentially claim a portion of my business if he could prove it was built using marital assets or during our marriage, even though he had contributed nothing to its success. However, she was very interested in the prenuptial agreement I had mentioned and asked me to bring every document related to our marriage and finances. Finding the prenup required digging through boxes of papers I had stored in my basement, but eventually I located the original signed agreement along with all our financial records from that period. Patricia studied the document carefully, making notes and asking questions about specific clauses and language. After 2 hours of review, she smiled for the first time since I had met her. The prenup was comprehensive and clearly written, establishing that assets brought into the marriage would remain separate property and that any jointly acquired property would be divided based on actual financial contributions. Most importantly, it specified that if either party abandoned the marriage for more than 6 months without supporting the household financially, they would forfeit any claim to assets accumulated by the other spouse during the separation. Brandon's legal team was led by Thomas Kirk, a lawyer known for aggressive tactics and psychological manipulation of opposing parties. Kirk specialized in cases where men sought to reclaim assets from ex-wives who had become successful after divorce. He had a reputation for finding loopholes and technicalities that could overturn seemingly clear-cut agreements. The first hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in late October. I took the day off work and spent extra time choosing my outfit, wanting to look professional but not ostentatious. Patricia had coached me on how to present my testimony clearly and factually without becoming emotional or defensive under Kirk's questioning. Brandon arrived at the courthouse looking like a completely different person than the man who had left us 3 years earlier. His navy suit was perfectly tailored, his hair was professionally styled, and he carried himself with an air of confidence that seemed almost theatrical. He had clearly invested significant time and money in projecting success and stability. During his testimony, Brandon painted himself as a father who had made temporary mistakes but was now ready to provide the stability that Lily needed. He spoke about his successful consulting business and his desire to be actively involved in his daughter's education and development. He claimed that I had been preventing him from seeing Lily and using her as a weapon to punish him for past mistakes. His description of our marriage was a masterpiece of selective memory and outright lies. He claimed that he had been supporting our household financially when he left, that he had only moved out temporarily to focus on building a business that would benefit our entire family. He said he had been sending money regularly, but that I had refused to accept his support because I was angry about our separation. When Kirk questioned me, he tried to paint me as a vindictive ex-wife who was using my newfound success to keep a loving father away from his child. He suggested that my business success was partially due to contacts and knowledge I had gained during my marriage, making Brandon entitled to compensation for his indirect contribution to my achievements. I answered every question calmly and factually, providing documentation for every expense I had paid alone. Every night I had spent working while caring for Lily every month that had passed without any financial support from Brandon. I had bank records, email screenshots, and a detailed timeline that painted a clear picture of abandonment, followed by years of self-reliance. The most heartbreaking part of the process was Lily's interview with the judge. Family court protocols required that she be questioned privately about her feelings regarding custody arrangements. She told Judge Margaret Foster that she did not really remember her daddy and that she felt scared when he tried to talk to her at school. She said she wanted to keep living with me and that Michael was nice and helped her with homework sometimes. When Patricia presented the prenuptial agreement as evidence, I watched Brandon's confident expression falter for the first time. Kirk argued that the document was invalid because it had been signed under duress and that Brandon had not fully understood its implications when he agreed to it. He also claimed that the abandonment clause was too harsh and should not be enforced after so many years. The hearing lasted 3 days, with both sides presenting financial experts and character witnesses. My employees testified about my work ethic and dedication to building the business from nothing. Brandon's colleagues spoke about his professional transformation and his expressed desire to be a good father. Throughout it all, I maintained my composure, while inside I was terrified that a judge might decide to split everything I had worked for with a man who had contributed nothing to its creation. The final day of our custody and property hearing arrived on a cold December morning. I had barely slept the night before, running through every possible outcome in my mind and trying to prepare myself for the worst-case scenario. Patricia had warned me that judges could be unpredictable, especially in cases involving successful women and fathers claiming they had reformed their lives. Brandon arrived looking more confident than ever, laughing with his lawyer in the hallway and projecting an air of certainty that made my stomach churn. During a brief recess, I overheard him telling Kirk that he expected to walk away with at least 30% of my assets, maybe more, if the judge was sympathetic to his claims about wanting to be an active father. Judge Margaret Foster had a reputation for being thorough and fair, but also for making decisions that sometimes surprised everyone in the courtroom. She was in her late 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see through any attempt at deception or manipulation. As she reviewed the final documents and prepared to deliver her ruling, the silence in the courtroom felt suffocating. She began by addressing the custody question first. Based on Lily's interview, the testimony from school officials and childcare providers, and the clear pattern of abandonment followed by years of absence, she was granting me full physical custody, with Brandon receiving supervised visitation rights for 2 hours every other weekend. He would need to complete parenting classes and maintain consistent contact for 6 months before the supervision requirement would be reconsidered. Brandon's face went white when he heard the custody decision, but Kirk whispered something in his ear that seemed to restore his confidence. I knew they were counting on the property division to be their real victory, the source of the financial windfall that had motivated this entire legal action. Then Judge Foster turned to the property division, and I held my breath as she began reading from her notes. She acknowledged that Colorado law typically favored equal division of marital assets, but stated that this case involved several unusual circumstances that affected the standard approach. First, she noted that the prenuptial agreement was valid, properly executed, and clearly understood by both parties at the time of signing. The document had been reviewed by independent legal counsel and signed without any evidence of coercion or misrepresentation. She found no grounds for invalidating the agreement based on the arguments presented by Brandon's attorney. Second, she pointed out that Brandon had voluntarily abandoned the marriage and his financial responsibilities for over 3 years, during which time he had contributed absolutely nothing to the household expenses, childcare costs, or any other aspect of family life. The prenup specifically addressed this scenario and clearly stated the consequences of such abandonment. Finally, she observed that all of my business success had occurred after Brandon left, using resources and skills that I had developed independently while he was pursuing other relationships and business ventures. There was no evidence that my achievements were based on anything other than my own hard work, education, and determination. Her final ruling was swift and decisive. Brandon would receive no portion of my business, our house, or any other assets I had accumulated since his departure. The prenuptial agreement was being enforced in full, and his abandonment of his family responsibilities had forfeited any claim he might otherwise have had to marital property. Additionally, Judge Foster ordered Brandon to pay $48,000 in back child support, calculated from the date of his departure, until the present plus interest and penalties for non-payment. She also awarded me attorney fees and court costs, noting that Brandon's lawsuit appeared to be motivated more by financial opportunity than genuine concern for his daughter's welfare. The moment when Judge Foster finished reading her decision was one of the most satisfying of my entire life. I watched Brandon's confident smile completely disappear, replaced by shock, then anger, then something that looked like panic. Kirk was frantically taking notes and whispering about appeals, but I could tell from his body language that he knew they had lost decisively. Outside the courthouse, Brandon tried one last desperate approach. He followed me to my car, calling my name and asking if we could talk privately. When I turned around, I saw a man who looked completely defeated, his expensive clothes and polished appearance no longer able to hide the desperation underneath. He apologized for everything, claiming that he had only pursued the lawsuit because his current lawyer had convinced him he had legitimate claims. He said he really did want to be part of Lily's life, and asked if we could work out some kind of informal arrangement that would not require supervision or court involvement. I looked at this man who had once been my husband, who had fathered my child, who had promised to love and support us through good times and bad. I felt no anger toward him anymore, just a kind of sad clarity about who he really was. I told him that if he genuinely wanted to be a father to Lily, the supervised visitation was the perfect opportunity to start building that relationship slowly and safely. But I also made it clear that I would never again allow him to disrupt our lives based on his whims or financial needs. Lily and I had built something beautiful and stable together, and I would protect that with everything I had. If he wanted to be part of our story going forward, he would have to prove his commitment through consistent actions, not just words. That evening, after I picked up Lily from Sarah's house, where she had spent the day playing with Miguel, she asked me if the scary man from her school would be coming around anymore. I explained that he was her biological father and that he might visit sometimes, but that our life together was safe and secure, and that nothing would change about our daily routine or our home. She hugged me tightly and said she was glad that I was her mommy, and that she did not need anyone else as long as we had each other. Her simple confidence in our life together reminded me of how far we had both come since that terrible morning when Brandon walked out with his suitcase. Over the following months, Brandon did complete his parenting classes and began his supervised visits with Lily. Sometimes she enjoyed seeing him, and sometimes she did not want to go. I never pressured her either way, trusting her instincts about what felt right for her. Gradually, she began to accept him as a peripheral figure in her life, someone who showed up occasionally, but who was not central to her sense of security or family. My business continued to grow and thrive. Within 2 years of the court case, we had expanded to 12 employees and moved into a larger office space. I had learned to balance success with personal happiness, taking real vacations with Lily, and making time for my relationship with Michael, who eventually became a permanent and beloved part of our family. The most important lesson I learned through this entire experience was that sometimes the most difficult decisions we make in our youth become the anchors that save us later in life. When my father suggested that prenuptial agreement, I almost let love and romantic idealism override practical wisdom. But protecting myself legally had protected my daughter's future in ways I could never have imagined. I also learned that building something from nothing, while incredibly difficult, creates a kind of strength and confidence that no one can ever take away from you. Every late night I had spent working while Lily slept, every client meeting I had managed, while worried about daycare pickup times, every financial struggle I had navigated alone, had contributed to a foundation that was entirely mine. Most importantly, I discovered that love and security do not always look the way we expect them to. The family that Lily and I created together with help from friends like Sarah and eventually Michael was not what I had planned when I walked down the aisle in that botanical garden. But it was real and strong and filled with the kind of daily kindness and mutual support that makes life meaningful. As I watch Lily grow into a confident, independent young girl who knows she is loved and protected, I feel grateful for every challenge that led us to this place. She has learned that families can take many different forms, that women can be strong and successful on their own, and that the people who truly care about you will show up consistently, not just when it is convenient for them. Life taught me that preparation and courage can protect what matters most when everything else falls apart. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your future, even when others did not understand why it was necessary? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming challenges and building the life you deserve. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that they are stronger than they know, and remember that sometimes the best thing you can do is trust yourself enough to prepare for an uncertain future. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that no matter what you are facing, you have more strength inside you than you realize.